What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. So let me just say right off the bat, this is week 5 of the best decks in the Fusion Strike standard format for the Pokemon TCG Lazy Edition. I'm just feeling very unmotivated, and we're doing it a little bit differently this weekend, but that also means you're going to get less statistics and less data, which you got in last week's video. And if you did check that out, check it out after this video. Check out last week's on the channel. It means you're going to get a lot more opinions from me this week. This video is less put together with exact information, and you're going to get more of my thoughts on the decks. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at last week's video. Like I said, Lazy Edition, I literally have my own video from last week up here as reference and a blank Google spreadsheet. We're going to look at last week's stuff as reference because honestly, the data has not changed very much. So we're going to look at last week's for reference. And then I'm going to tell you guys what the 5 decks in order I would be bringing to a regional sized event. If I had a regional event coming up or for any major online events. Basically an event that matters to me, what decks I would be bringing. So before we get into that, shout out to my sponsors, PotownStore.com, the best place to get PTCGO codes. We can go find that slide on last week's video. Look at that. The best place to get PTCGO codes. Use code CELIO for 5% off. CardTrooperGames.com, where you can find booster boxes and singles, and also use code CELIO. They actually have Brilliant Stars booster box pre-orders for like under $110 after you use my code. So definitely check that out. And then all of my standard format deck lists are on PokemonCard.io. Let's stop that video from playing and go over to here. So last week, the major changes I want to talk about for this week from what I saw in the metagame and also what I saw in the statistics is that Gengar VMAX, its average points went down to like 6.5. So it would be like number 9 or number 10 if it's even on the list this week. It had that good first week of being a deck performance, and it really fell down now after more people tried playing it. Jolteon really stayed up. It could even maybe be the second best stats wise. Suicune and Teleon variants are being continued to be experimented with, but they're really not one deck. If you count all the Suicune and Teleon non-Ludicolo decks as one archetype, then they do have an average points of higher than Mew VMAX. Suicune and Teleon will be number 1 as of this week. But there's a lot of different variants, so I don't really like considering it all one archetype. I think that data is like kind of an outlier. But the major change looking at last week's would be Gengar VMAX definitely moves way down. I think Urshifu Moltres is not doing as well, and I think Urshifu Melanie is popping up a little bit more. Jolteon VMAX is doing well. Rapid Strike Malamar is doing okay. Jolteon VMAX is actually doing really well. Leafeon Moltres is seeing more play now. And also Ross Cawthon's Hoopa Moltres Rogue deck. It doesn't have enough of a sample size to actually be included in the data, but we get to talk about those kinds of things this week because of that. And we'll just look. This is how it changed from last week to this week. Zacian Zamazenta is actually still performing really well. You got those couple people playing it. Joshua Sutherland's always doing well with it, and so on. So don't underestimate that deck showing up, and also the Duraludon VMAX deck that Grant and Manley played. I forgot to add Zacian Zam. Spoiler alert, Zacian Zamazenta will not be one of my top 5 decks. So let's talk about the 5 decks I would personally bring if I was going to a regional sized event, playing in an official event online, playing in something that matters to me. And let me just give you kind of my background of how I work with this kind of stuff. And also the people that are around me are like-minded as well. My testing group and my friends that I, trust with metagaming and deck building and deck decisions. We tend to want to play a deck that will beat the best deck and also beat the things trying to beat the best deck. And that's kind of the dream, right? And sometimes it does work out, and sometimes you just can't find that deck. I also like to try to find a 50-50 deck, kind of a deck that takes 50-50s or better across the board. And Mew VMAX, I think, kind of does satisfy that, except it is also satisfying the role of the best deck in format, which means it's in the spotlight, which means a lot of people are going to want to counter it, and Mew VMAX is counterable. So it's not that I don't want to play the best deck. Um, because it's the best deck. It's I want to find the best deck for a specific tournament. That's always what I'm trying to do. And a lot of my testing group and friends are like-minded in that way, that it's not that we want to be able to win with something that's not the best deck. It's not about that. If the best deck is outright the thing that we should be playing, then let's go for it and play it. But the best deck in format isn't always the best play for specific events, and using your knowledge to metagame and try to just give yourself the best advantage matchup wise, circumvent some of the RNG and the luck, and then you try to circumvent more RNG and more luck from affecting your games by just playing really well within those matchups once you get there. With that being said, Mew VMAX would be the fifth deck I would be bringing to an event. I got little gold, silver, bronze up here. So Mew VMAX would be number 5 for me. If nothing else works out, I would be bringing Mew VMAX because I know it's the best deck in format for a reason, and I know I will have to suck it up and take some rounds where I hit people specifically trying to beat the deck I'm playing, but that's okay. It means it's a very inherently strong deck if people are trying to just outright beat it and ignore the other stuff. So with that being said, if I were to find a Mew VMAX variant that felt better against other Mew VMAX variants, let's say the Mellow Edda tech, or which has now become the kind of the list that everybody's using now, um, for Mew VMAX. If my group found that out, or if I was onto that a little before the rest of the people, and I thought I would be going into a tournament against all of these Mew VMAX decks, but most of them would not be playing the better build, which I thought could get me the win in the mirror, I would be more inclined to play the best deck in format, which in this case is Mew VMAX. Because another thing that I keep in mind is mirror matches. If everybody's just playing the same 60 optimal cards, if that 60 optimal is pretty decided on and we have no way to prepare to counter for that, then that also is not circumventing luck the best way, because the coin flips are going to matter. If you're playing the same thing versus the same thing, it is really going to come down to who draws better, whereas different decks can negotiate their bad hands a little differently. A single strike deck drawing poorly versus an Ice Rider Calyrex deck, there's going to be different things. Okay, well, did they hit their path to the peak this turn to stop me? And then did I end up drawing into a Houndoom and single strike in one shot? Whereas in Mew VMAX versus Mew VMAX, it's very cut and dry when you're in that mirror match on who is drawing better. It's almost measurable who is drawing better when it's an exact mirror match. And if I think 20+% of the tournament's going to be this same Mew VMAX build, I'm not going to want to play it. But if I have a spicier build that I feel like can take an advantage in those mirror matches, then I would be much more inclined to be picking Mew VMAX. My next that I would want to play, and the fourth deck I would want to play right now, would be the Hoopa Moltres deck from Ross Cawthon, and for a couple of reasons. One, it beats Mew VMAX pretty handedly. Two, it beats a lot of straightforward decks. And three, I'm confident that I can use this deck to outplay many matchups if I'm the more skilled player in that matchup. And that's going to be a big thing for me. And kind of going along with that last point is also, this is a deck that right now, like I said, if I was going into a tournament today, tomorrow, this weekend, this is a deck that not a lot of people are practiced against at the moment. And I love using those kinds of decks because people are not going to play optimally against you, and you'll have even more shots to outplay them if you're playing a rogue, so to speak, deck. This one's coming into the meta a little bit. So Hoopa Moltres would be the fourth deck I would play right now, going into a big event. The third deck I would play is Jolteon VMAX. I'm a huge fan of the list that my mom and I have been playing, or she played in a tournament, and I'm just kind of playing outside of tournaments right now, that I featured on the channel a couple days ago. Also, by the way, Hoopa Moltres, I featured that on the channel yesterday. Um, so I'm a big fan of Jolteon VMAX deck. I also feel like that can be built and also piloted in a way that some of the matchups that seem shaky aren't, or even really, really bad, aren't actually that bad. I think Single Strike Urshifu Umbreon is a completely winnable matchup for Jolteon VMAX. The boss's orders really, really work. Just stick something up. If it doesn't work, you got two Jolteon VMAXs. Try again, stick something up. And if they whiff one of those times, you're spreading 200, 200. And a lot of times that's just going to end up in you winning the game. And then also the Mew VMAX matchup is probably 50-50 or so. Um, with all the techs, with the Fan of Waves, the Path of the Peaks, the Sydneys, the double boss to try to stick up Genesect, on paper it looks like, okay, you're really teched against this deck. It's a favored matchup, but Mew VMAX is so inherently strong. I'm not really comfortable calling many things favored versus it. The Hoopa Moltres deck, it's like 99-1. Like Hoopa Moltres is just so strong against Mew VMAX. I haven't found many great ways for Mew VMAX to play around it, especially with the lists that are currently being used. I do think Oricorio could change some things if they can just if the Mew VMAX cannot take knockouts and just spread damage with Oricorio, but then again, the Hoopa Moltres deck is playing for scoop up nets. But yeah, Jolteon VMAX is a really strong deck. It's only horrible matchup in my opinion. Like, you are not winning this unless something goes really good for you. The only really bad matchup is Rapid Strike Urshifu, either in Melanie or Moltres, whatever. So yeah, I love Jolteon VMAX. That would be my third pick. My second pick would be Suicune Ludi. I think Suicune Ludi is another deck that allows you to express skill, and it has a lot of, I don't even know if I'd say 50-50 matchups, but I feel like you can go up against just about any deck on this list I have here, aside from Jolteon, and feel like you have a decent shot at winning at the very least. And that's great. Like, I love that feeling. Like, okay, there's one bad matchup floating around that less than 10% of the field will play. Even if I do hit it, I can try to play well to maybe sneak out a win. But all of these decks, you have the shot, you have the chance to pop off against them and play well, 4-7 prize games with Inteleon. Maybe add in cheeky techs, play an Echoing Horn, play a Fan of Waves, things that really stand out in closed deck lists environments if we're talking about an in real life tournament. So Suicune Ludicolo, I think, is just an amazing deck, really strong, solid matchup spread, has skill expression in it, but not so much that it's going to wear you out over the course of 9 rounds and a day 2 and top 8, etc. And my final deck, honestly, talking about Jolteon and Suicune has made this 2 and 3 even closer to 1 than they were before going into the video. I didn't realize how much I actually like Suicune, Ludi, and Jolteon as compared to number 1 before talking about it so much, but number 1 would be Rapid Strike Urshifu and Teleon Melanie for me. I am now off of the Rapid Strike Urshifu and Teleon Moltres train and onto the Melanie train. Of course, this build is less good versus Mew, but it still can beat Mew. I'd say the Moltres is a clean 50-50 versus Mew VMAX, whereas Urshifu and Teleon Melanie is probably in the ballpark of 40-60 or 35-65 in Mew VMAX's favor, but the important thing is it can beat it. I feel like in testing, in tournaments and ladder, I've gone probably about 50-50 with Urshi Melanie against Mew VMAX, unless we're without counting games with just really terrible draws. But I'd even go down to say 40-60 in favor of Mew VMAX doing better in that matchup. But I'm comfortable with that because Urshifu, Inteleon, Melanie feels really great against everything else. Maybe save for Duraludon VMAX, but or maybe Sylveon VMAX, but against the rest of the top of the meta, Single Strike, Suicune Ludi, Jolteon, Gengar, Rapid Strike Melanie, other Rapid Strike Urshifu variants, Ice Rider Calyrex, Leafeon, the Hoopa Moltres deck. Rapid Strike Urshifu and Teleon feels 50-50 or really good versus a lot of the meta. And then UV Max is rough. It is about 20% of the meta in a lot of tournaments happening right now. But I also feel that I can play the deck at a high level, and that if there is a skill difference between myself and the opponent, sometimes I can use skill expression to actually win the matchup. Now, Mew VMAX is a low skill floor, average skill ceiling deck, so it has a low point of entry to play it at a moderate level, so I'm not always going to be able to outplay Mew VMAX players, because sometimes the deck will just carry them to victory with, average piloting. But Rapid Strike Urshifu and Teleon Melanie feels very, very strong to me right now. I've been using Tord Rekolev's list from Channel Fireball Pokemon with just one change. If you go look in the GG Tour tournament, I played it in that with that one change, but I've also updated it on Pokemon Card IO. I think I took out a card for one fan of Waves, and I can't remember exactly what card I took from Tord's list, but it's 59 of the same list. And yeah, so those are my thoughts. These are the 5 decks I would be choosing between if I had a large tournament coming up. And like I said, if you didn't check out last week's best decks video, if you want more data and more statistics on how these decks have been performing, definitely go check out that one. But a combination of, I know people have been wanting more opinion piece type videos from me on the decks and the format and the metagame, and also just not having the mental power today and this past week to do the whole slideshow presentation for the best decks. So, and also I don't think the data really changed much, so I think the opinion piece was more valuable anyway. So thank you for bearing with me for the Lazy Edition Best Decks video this week, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content if you have not already, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.